Sorry I haven't checked in a little while now. You see, I had very important places to be. I went to see a very important Jarl named Curtis Jackson. Jarl Curtis Jackson. Today, me and Oskar want to talk about something really exciting. Boats and women. To me, that always seems like a good idea. So let's just dive into it because this is such a cool thing. First and foremost, I need to clarify this because otherwise it will become a bit confusing. In Sweden, as with any place, there are different locations with similar names. So I will talk about women in boat graves, but in two separate locations, both of them are named Tuna. For probably a very good reason that I don't know anything about. So one of these Tuna is Tuna Alsike in close proximity to Uppsala, around here. And the other Tuna that I will talk about is Tuna Badelunda, outside of Västerås. So now there's no confusion. There is one location here and one location there, and both of them are named Tuna, and both of them contain women in boat graves. But let's start with Alsike. Alsike is a landscape that is, very, so to say, shaped by history and time. From the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age and further on. Its history is so distinctive around this area. So around 100 remains on this little tiny spot have been found and registered here. Along the old shoreline, which is now open farmland, lies about 300 Iron Age graves, spread across 26 different sites in this area. And they've been preserved to such a degree that they're kind of still clinging on from their time to ours. So the specific grave field named Tuna in Alsike stands out. Not only in Alsike, but generally it stands out. And this is where the boat graves play a factor. The grave field, mainly consisting of flat earth graves, was discovered in 1893 during clay extraction. By the discovery, several graves have probably already been destroyed due to, if you don't know it's there, you might run over it with a plow or whatever. When the grave field was discovered, it had excavations carried out in different stages. These stages were between 1895 to 1896, and then again during 1928. It was first led by Hjalmar Stolpe, very famous Swedish archaeologist, and then it was continued on by Nils Åberg and Ture Jason Arne. Arne was the one publishing the excavation results in 1934. So why am I bringing this up? Well, it's very curious and interesting because that means that additional graves might still be found for the future, which is super cool. In total, 19 graves have been investigated. And of these 19 graves, 12 of them are very high-class furnished boat graves. How cool! All of them were inhumation graves. And in archaeology, what this means is that inhumation is the opposite of cremation. Cremation, I think most people know what it is, when you burn the bones after you are passed away, and you are just turned into ashes, while inhumation is when you are buried, like in a coffin, for example. You're buried as you died, the whole body. There's nothing done with the body, so to say. Inhumation, cremation, opposites. But all 19 of these graves were boat graves. But 12 of them were extra, top-notch furnished boat graves. But all 19 of them were actually boat graves. 17 of these boat graves contained men. Only 2 of these boat graves exclusively withheld women. But it's also important for me to be transparent and mention that one of these 19 boat graves also contained a man and a woman together, so a double grave. So 2 of these graves were exclusively women in separate boats, and then another one was not exclusively containing a woman specifically. It was a man and a woman in that one boat grave. And this double burial was named Grave 3. I know it's very personal when it comes to archaeology. Grave 3. Why I find it interesting to mention that the boat graves at Tuna, they were not preceded by cremation, is because during the Iron Age and actually way back into the Bronze Age, cremation became the main way of burying someone. You know, it became such an important part of the burial ritual. So it is quite curious that within the boat graves we have inhumations instead. Let's take a closer look on these female graves and hold them up next to each other to see what they contain actually. When you compare two contemporary boat graves to each other from the same place, it's very interesting to see what can we tell through the grave goods. So these two graves, they are called grave 6B and grave 10. And we will start with grave 6B. So boat grave 6B is dated to around the year 900 CE, so current era, which is the same as AD. And the boat type is a clinker-built boat. And fun fact, this is deemed to be the most exclusive and biggest boat out in the whole gravefield. Out of all of them, not just between the women, but out of all 19 boat graves there. The body placement is in the middle of the ship, half turned to the left side, and legs are slightly extended. For those of you who are not used to archaeology, sometimes how a body is placed, we're so used to if a body is placed in a coffin, it's head there, feet there, and that's that. Back in the day, it was more emphasis on how a body actually was turned. In previous videos of mine where I talk about the different types of structures in gravefields and so on, how a body is placed in the earth actually matters in ancient time. I mean, I bet they do today as well in many cultures. But that is why I mention it, so you are aware of it. I'm not mentioning this just out of macabre, interest here. And the boat size, which was the biggest boat, is around 7.8 times 1.4 meters. And I will write the Americanized version somewhere here. The placement of the boat as well matters. So the bow was facing the west-northwest. It contained 2 glided oval brooches, 1 bronze ring, 1 beaded necklace, 97 beads, made out of glass, rock crystal, carnelian, 1 trefoil brooch, 1 ring-headed pin, 1 iron scissors, 1 iron key. And this is something that you will run into during the Viking Age, is that many women are buried with keys, which is pretty cool. That is for a future video. There are actually different types of keys and they have different styles depending on where they have been found. It's an amazing topic, but let's continue. Warriors' iron fragments that we don't really know anymore what they were, and 2 small clay vessels. A pretty rich lady, I would say. She was probably very rich in life, more rich in life than she was in death, hopefully. I always want people to live their best life. Sorry, there's a fly going around here. Let's get on with boat grave 10. Boat grave 10 is also dated around 900 CE and is contemporary with the other lady. This lady's boat is, however, not as fancy. It is a dug-out boat type. Her body is placed middle of the ship, also turned on her left side, legs slightly extended. And her boat was around 4.7 meters time 0.9 meters. And the same in this case, the bow was facing west-northwest. So you see, the placement matters, right? There's a side note to this boat, and it is that the western part of the boat was empty. There was nothing there. Curious. This woman's grave goods are not as exclusive as the first woman, but let's go through them and see. She was also pretty prepared for the afterlife, I would say. Her boat contained 1 carved bone object, 2 combs, 1 knife in a sheath, positioned with the tip pointing toward the stomach, 1 pair of scissors, 1 tweezer, 1 needle case, 1 piece of bronze wire, 1 equal-armed brooch, 1 bronze wire ring, 1 large ring-headed pin, 2 oval double-shelled brooches, 1 bronze pendant and 1 bronze chain, 1 arm ring, and over 50 beads as well, made out of various like crystals and glass and so on. So here we see two contemporary, very cool graves, and they are very similar and they are also very, very different. Exciting that they were facing the same way and they have been placed the same in the graves. And it's not a surprise to me at all that the woman in the fancier boat is the woman that holds the key. She might have even been a very, very influential, owner of a farmstead. And this is what we know now, right? And this is very interesting on its own. But there was a time where this was, pure nonsense, like back in the 1800s. The boat grave was a man thing, okay? A warrior thing. Many have this image of these, powerful burning boats, like in the sagas where Balder dies and he gets to be sent off in a burning Viking ship away in the sea. And that is the warrior's death. And that is kind of like, that is kind of what they were imagining back in the day. All of these were supposed to be men, armed, powerful, buried like chieftains beneath the skies, and all of that stuff. And this is an idea that has shaped generations of archaeological theory and thinking. So when the first female boats in Tuna appeared during the 1800s, they were dismissed. It was dismissed. Unheard of. Not on my watch, they said. So overlooked, forgotten, and the narrative was too strong, too comfortable. Boat graves were for men. Even as late as 1970, respected scholars have echoed this belief still. But now with modern technology and also modern thinking, the past tells a different story, really. The evidence tells a different story. Power, status, and ritual were never only restored for men. And with this little segue, let's look into Badelunda, because the drama is about to get real. It is one thing that I am thinking that I would want to clarify. In archaeology, like throughout all of archaeological history, basically, determining the sex of a person buried in an ancient grave has often relied on physical remains. When bones have, melted away into the soil, when they are missing, when they are too vague, when it's not, if you only have like a hand or like a little finger bone left, archaeologists have historically turned to the grave goods instead. So in the 1800s and early 1900s, a system developed, and this is today very, very questioned within archaeological research and academia and so on, and it is very debated. But back then, sword equals man, and brooches and needles equals woman. So in the archaeological record from back in the day, if something is written as a man, it might not be actually a man, like purely biologically, because they had this nifty little system where, sword equals man and brooches equal woman. Good, call it a day. So they might not actually have looked at the bones themselves, but then all of a sudden as well, daggers started appearing. And they appeared together with both needles and brooches and swords. So then, it became messy. And then imagine the graves where there was only daggers found and they couldn't test the bones, or, they didn't know what was going on. Then it kind of drove scholars a bit more towards, the thought that, hey, maybe assumption about male and female graves are based in stereotypes. And actually we do not know as much about these ancient times and their norms as we would like to admit. I feel like I need to raise this point because I have on more than one occasion seen a history content creator. They go on and on and on about how modern feminism has actually ruined archaeology. Modern development in any scientific field is not a bad thing, usually. It's usually a sign of that things are moving forward and we're actually learning more and more as we go on. And to bring it back with the nature sciences, it is not that archaeology has, popped off with modern feminism per se. It is actually nature science mainly that has made archaeology had to get over all of this stereotypical kind of thinking, because the evidence is there. Like the nature sciences has helped us with like DNA, isotope analysis, and so on, that to confirm that okay, this is the evidence. Like there's no going around it. This is the scientific evidence, which has then also led to this kind of modern feminism coming in, because all of a sudden all of these dudes talking about boat graves and warriors, they had to sit down and actually go, oh no, how many hundreds and thousands or millions of skeleton parts do the archaeologists of the future have to now go through with nature science, because we decided that sword equals man, needle equals women. So like, you know, it ends up in these murky waters where the question isn't whether women of the Iron Age, or before that time as well, could be warriors or leaders or magicians or, you know, hold powerful status in their society. But then the question rather becomes, why would we ever assume that they weren't? And just because some very smart person wrote something down during the 1800s or 1900s doesn't make it so, you know. Now, to the drama of Badelunda, Tuna Badelunda. In Tuna, in Västmanlands, a remarkable burial ground was excavated in the early 1950s. And what they discovered is one of those things that completely shattered and challenged the assumptions of the archaeological record of the time. They found 8 boat graves, all oriented northwest to southwest. And most likely, and as far as we know today, all of these boat graves belong to women. All of the boats, both dug-out boats and clinker-built boats, ranging from 4.5 meters up to 7 meters long, contained women. Archaeologists that has been going over these excavations, they think that these women were buried over the course of several centuries, from around the 600s CE to 1000 CE. Perhaps one per generation, maybe. One thing is consistent: the women that were buried here, they were wealthy. And because they were women, and because, you know, why not? It is thought that maybe this has something to do with fertility cult. I am just throwing it in there. You know, usually it goes like that. Women are the bearers of life historically, etc., etc., you know. And then usually archaeologists, we have a thing for cult. So then we end up on like, women, only women, fertility cult, makes sense. You know, we kind of go back to the whole Venus thinking over here. And since there are many, many graves, I will just give you a little rundown of the different graves and what is up with them. And they also have very, very personal names, of course. Grave 23B, Grave 35, Grave 46B, and so on. Grave 23B contained no skeletal remains, only boat rivets. But the jewelry suggested a woman. It was 2 oval brooches, a round brooch, a knife with a wooden handle, an iron needle case, possible votive ring, and 2 worn horse studs. Grave 35 belonged to a young woman identified by a tooth and a forearm fragment. Her jewelry had fallen into her lap as the body decayed. A garnet inlaid disc on bow brooch, an equal-armed brooch, an oval brooch, twisted animal head pendants, a bronze bead, a knife, pottery shards, and 33 colorful glass beads. Grave 46B lacked any bones but held 5 glass beads, a knife, spindle whorl, iron fittings from a possible casket, and around 300 boat nails. So they found it was a clinker boat, so they found the nails going like a boat silhouette. And again, these boat graves, they are interpreted as women's graves because they show such a similarity to the other graves in the same area. You see, I don't just go on my little ramblings for nothing in these videos. It is to build an understanding with you, like why archaeologists say and do certain things that we do and say. Grave 48 contained rib fragments from a woman aged between 20 to 40 years old. She was buried with bronze and silver pendants, a cross-shaped pewter brooch, 2 oval brooches, a bronze needle case, tools like tweezers, scissors, knives, chain fragments, rings, also beads of glass, bone, and amber. There was even traces of textile and leather in this boat. One cool thing about this boat grave is that they also found a stray Bronze Age axe, but that probably belonged to an earlier grave, like a Bronze Age grave beneath that has been disturbed while this boat has gone in there, and then they have kind of mixed because Earth moves during many, many years. Grave 75 held the best preserved boat. So good on you, Grave 75. It is the most complete burial. The woman laid in a semi-seated position, richly dressed and adorned. She had 2 oval brooches, an equal armed brooch, a bronze chain, 14 pendants. That's a lot. And some of these pendants are possibly pressed Arabic coins, which is very cool. She was probably well-traveled, this lady then, and silk-trimmed clothing. There was also household goods found there. It included wooden boxes, bowls, spoon, plate, drinking vessels, as well as a whetstone. It's one of those stones, you know, for sharpening knives. A sharpening stone, basically. Then we have grave 76, which is dated during the first part of the 1000 CE. So around 1025 to 1050 CE. This grave held few remains, but included a glass bead, bronze ring, a knife, horse stud, and an Anglo-Saxon silver penny that depicts Ethelred II. And that penny is from between 1009 to 1015, which is exciting. It gives us a little bit more, you know, information about this woman while she was alive. Grave 79 is one of the graves that is standing out a little bit more. The boat has been placed upside down over the deceased one. And and why would they do that? Possibly to conceal or protect the grave. Later it has tipped to the side, and the grave goods were found beneath. They remain because they've been protected. They included a round brooch, key fragments, a knife, a draw hook, iron sheet, a rod, 11 glass beads, and the hook. The hook is interesting because it most likely belonged to a wagon or a sled. Grave 84 is the last one. This grave is dated also during the early 1000 CE, so between 1000 CE to 1025 CE, around there. And this also contains no skeletal remains anymore, but we have the grave goods and they are pointing us in certain directions, right? It included a ring brooch, gold foil fragments, a silver pendant, a silver coin, scissors, knife, a set of 3 linked rings, a brooch fitting, a rod, 18 beads made of glass, carnelian and rock crystal. And it is thought that the lack of typical women's brooches might be due to poor preservation or actually grave robbing. That is something that has been lifted forward. And taken together, like in their context, this boat grave field is extraordinary. A long continuous tradition of what we believe are women that are laid to rest in boats. So it doesn't seem like they are exceptions or abnormalities. It seems like it's very intentional that they are where they are. They are where they're supposed to be. There is yet another grave that I want to talk to you about that is not a boat grave, but it is in Tuna in Badelunda, and it is the oldest one out of these graves in the grave field. And this grave is extraordinary. It has been described as the richest Roman period grave ever found in Sweden. And it belonged to a woman. It was 1952 when a homeowner was digging for foundation, and that was when they struck into this chamber. She was buried in a chamber tomb adorned with gold neck rings, gold arm rings, and glass objects of different kinds. So she predates the boat burials, but she is part of the tradition of burying extraordinary women in extraordinary graves. What does all of this tell us? Well, perhaps it tells us that maybe these women weren't just honored at home, you know. Maybe they had taken parts of journeys abroad, like considering the coins, etc. So these doesn't seem to be isolated at all kind of people. It seems like they have traveled far and wide based upon the grave goods. And besides the boat graves and this chamber grave, we also have in total 86 graves in this area. So it is a big gravefield. But the confirmed men in this gravefield, they were buried on the outskirts in simpler cremation graves with only personal weapons and so on, while the women were in the center of the gravefield. Which is also why archaeologists are kind of drawn to this fertility cult theory, because if what we perceive as men is buried on the outskirts in cremated graves together with swords, etc., and the women that have very richly furnished graves are in the middle of all of it. It paints a picture. Now we come to one of the bigger dramatic effects of this gravefield, together with some newer science as well. The entire gravefield seems to be built around one key grave, and this grave is called Grave X. And this woman's burial, it is centuries older than many of the other graves found in this gravefield. But later burials were placed in direct relation to hers. And recently there has been DNA testing made on these skeletons that they actually did find in the boat graves. And this shows that these women were in fact related to each other. So, hereditary line of powerful women is what we are probably looking at. One per generation buried within their own ship, which, would make sense based upon the DNA evidence so far, as well as the bigger picture. And besides the prestigious objects we have already gone through, silk ribbons, amulets, there has also been founds of staffs, vulva staff. So Norse seeresses practicing seder, ancient Scandinavian magic. So it doesn't seem like these women were just respected. They might have been spiritual leaders of their time. One of the wooden staffs found in Tuna was never preserved, unfortunately. But similar staffs have been found for reference in the grave of Oseberg in Norway, for example, also another famous women grave. It is, a continuance of women being buried with this type of staffs. Looking back at boat grave 75, it has been sewn together using a technique found only amongst the Sami people. It is not put together with nails, rivets, but stitched seams. And this is something that has been noted in Sami vessels and boats. This Sami-style vessel, it kind of hints at trade, contact, perhaps shared knowledge across cultures. So where does all of this information lead us? Where do we end up in all of this information? The Tuna graves in Badelunda, they tell a powerful story. One of women who were not only respected in death, but they were revered and must have played central roles of their society. And this also comes back to the DNA and the bloodline and so on, that this is not random women buried in random ways. They might have been practitioners of sacred rites in Västmanlands during their time. And they have obviously had something to do with trade and traveling, all of them, in their separate timelines, since different objects from different travels are in different graves. I would want to know your thoughts. What do you think about this topic? Are these women priestesses? Are they noble women? Are they all together? Is it the same stuff? What are your ideas on women during the Iron Age? And what is your view on the stereotypical man warrior, women seamstress kind of imagery that we get fed still in in popular culture about the Viking Age. My thought is that we are only now scratching the surface of understanding what has been going on during the Iron Age. But please let me know. What are your thoughts in the comments? Please let me know. I always love reading the comments. I always love hearing from you guys. Like, what are your thoughts about these topics? Because I am only living inside of my head, right? And I am only translating the research through my brain. So I would love to know what you guys think as well. We thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. And I hope you have a good day ahead of you, or behind you, or tomorrow. I hope you're good, is what I'm saying. And also, as always, I hope you learned something. Hej då!